Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news for May 15th, 2024. Let me just double check that because I want to make sure I am correct. Yes. And that my new dating system to label video file names by the date is accurate. Okay, it is. Good. So the Limit 1 festival is now underway and new accessories have been added. 2 issues now with less just have a coughing fit at the beginning of the stream, why not? Those would be 2 issues, certainly with less focus, as I am going to be playing less Yu-Gi-Oh! As far as just can I get enough as a free-to-play player to afford all the accessories that are going to be released, and even more so, am I going to be able to play enough to get rewards? Don't really care about titles. I never really did. So today will be also a fairly different stream as far as the catch-up section, so I think we'll probably jump into the news almost instantaneously here, because yesterday I managed to accomplish absolutely nothing YouTube related. I had a lot of extra commitments on top of extra commitments, which those have been taking up a lot of my time lately, and so I never found the time to even start to play Fallout New Vegas. So I have absolutely nothing new to say about Fallout New Vegas, and the only time I would have even had a brief amount of time would have been somewhere around 4 or 5. It really sucks because I woke up somewhere around 9 in the morning and didn't even have the beginning of a chance to record anything until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So that definitely is a sampling of what a person trying to do YouTube as a hobby would suffer from, is that if you are going to school or going to a job, probably going to a job 9 to 5, coming home and at 5 and trying to squeeze out even one hour, 22-minute recording session can be very difficult. By the time it was late in the evening there, I realized I had not really checked my sprinkler system for this season after winter, and so I needed to walk around the perimeter of the house and see if the sprinkler system hoses had sprung any new leaks over the winter, because I'm lazy and don't put it up. The way I've built this do-it-yourself sprinkler irrigation system is not conducive to the idea of putting it up at the end of a season and winterizing, even if that is perhaps very much what you should do. Let's hope I have a spellbook card I can send to the graveyard. Or better yet, let's just hope for quick victories. But I really need a massive amount of quick victories here, though, to get up to where I need to go, I would think. So anyways, I walked around the perimeter of my house looking at the hoses. One of my hoses had a few pinhole leaks. Feels like probably some of the wild animals, probably cats, chewed on the hose and poked holes in it. I do have a bunch of kittens, newborn kittens running around, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what happened. But also, I am trying not to spend massive amounts of money when I first built the irrigation system, which is to say, the second time I built the irrigation system. The first time was a fairly large failure, and I had to basically start over. But yeah, that second time I built it, I had already spent so much money just on the bare necessities that replacing all the hoses, which usually irrigation systems would either be connected with 3/4 PVC pipe, or more recently PEX of a certain outside style of PEX plumbing. And I would recommend PEX, but who knows which is in the long run going to be better. There's a extremely long history of new technologies when it comes to just construction that sound like great ideas, and then 10-20 years later they come back and prove to not be actually good ideas. Banish 7 cards. Oh man. That is totally not worth it. But yeah, I'm using the smallest amount of adapters you can possibly use, because every new connection is just another point where a leak might spring. And you're just going to lose more water from every connection point. But I am using adapters to adapt garden hoses to a irrigation system manifold that I bought pre-built the second time. I was trying to make one by hand. Don't try that. It's great. It won't work. So then it's like garden hose from manifold to garden hose bases, the spikes that plug into the ground, and then the spikes use a like 1/4 inch to 3/4 inch nipple adapter, male to male nipple adapter is what it's called, to make the spike work with a standard pop-up sprinkler head that normally would be in the ground. Now, because of the spike is much higher than it should be, and the higher the water gets thrown, the higher the chance that the wind or evaporation is going to evaporate large percentages of your water before it even hits the ground and gets absorbed. So it's definitely not a super efficient system, the way I've done it, but it is a fairly portable system. I could take the whole thing and move it to a different house if necessary without having to dig anything, and it's the digging in irrigation systems that's going to cost you thousands upon thousands of dollars too. Just renting a trencher, having people dig by hand, doing the 811 call before your dig so you don't hit pipes, electrical wires, things like that that have already been buried, internet wires. Yeah. Installing an irrigation system from new is definitely something that you should not do it yourself on. Maintaining one, you can do, certainly. You can replace a sprinkler head, that's one of the things. I think one of my sprinkler heads just froze. It had all kinds of cracks around it. So either it froze or something hit it or bit it. And I would imagine it just froze. And pop-up sprinkler heads are maybe a little expensive to replace every season, but I didn't only replace one. So, and that's pretty much what you can expect. It's before you start using your irrigation system every spring after winter, you should be checking it, and you should be checking it fairly commonly and fairly often. I did notice that Ratio has a flow meter. Now, I'm not sure if they had this before or not, but there's a wired and a wireless flow meter you can install that would help you detect leaks, but it's fairly expensive. And I could see certainly wanting to add that, but also the flow meter would have to really be plumbed in. It's designed to be plumbed into PVC pipe, and so I don't know how I would easily add that. And I don't think the wireless one makes any sense at all, because usually everything is buried underground, and so you're gonna not get a good signal on the wireless. The wired makes a lot more sense, and it works automatically with the Ratio. Ratio has several accessories that they also sell now as a sprinkler controller that is very nice. The Ratio 3 Plus is very nice, but they also are trying to make more money, so they have partnered to sell umbrellas that will close based on whether the weather, whether it's raining or not, or open when it's raining, or close when it's windy. Which, yeah, electric umbrellas for your outside is kind of crazy. Weirdly though, that same technology for like an awning would probably be a little bit more helpful. They have a way to add fertilizer to your irrigation system, which you have to be very careful about local ordinances around that, to my understanding. Make sure you have an anti-siphon valve so the fertilizer doesn't go back into your house's plumbing and come out something else, or go into the main water intake of the whole city. They have a smart bird feeder, which I've heard the smart bird feeder is not actually very good, so I wouldn't recommend that one. They have a weather station, which would give you what they call hyperlocal weather reports, which you probably don't need, as to the wind and whether it's raining. Some jurisdictions used to require like water sensor shutoffs, if rain shutoffs for sprinklers. So the weather station might be better than that, considering those shutoffs seem to never really work after a while. But yeah, I am absolutely not suited for any physical labor at all, and so just bending over, picking up a hose, replacing it with another hose, and removing a sprinkler head and replacing it with some temporary sprinkler heads that are way worse, took probably an hour and had me gasping for breath. Bending over and as a fairly tall person is actually fairly difficult for me. And as soon as you start testing the system, all the grass around the area is going to be wet, so you are going to get muddy, you are going to get wet no matter what. I had been replacing my old hoses bit by bit as they bust a leak with 15-foot hoses, so that there would be new connectors to add yet another sprinkler head. I think in a lot of places though, I've probably done about as much of that as as I should, as I can, and I should more than likely start to buy either 50 feet or 100 feet hoses, depending on whether they're wrapping around and going to the front of the house from the back or not. You can certainly combine two 15 to get a 30, but that's then another connection. It will perhaps in the long run stop you from having to patch any hoses that have burst, but I've bought some. The hoses I'm buying I'm hoping are fairly high quality, and so I'm hoping they won't burst or spring leaks, and so far they haven't, but it's very much not comparing apples to apples. My old hoses are 10 years old plus. These new ones have only been around for maybe a season or two. They feel like they're thicker rubber hoses, and certainly you can get some really cheap ones that are very thin-walled and gimmick hoses if you were otherwise. Speaking of hoses, if you don't want to do the whole do-it-yourself thing with Rydo has since introduced just wireless hose timers that you would put on a single hose to water your yard. So if you wanted to proactively have a string, or more likely a single sprinkler head in one spot of the yard, and then you were going to move it to the next day, you could do it that way. But that's definitely not the way Rydo wants you to water things. Rydo's style of watering is based on their belief, which is probably scientifically backed, to water a little bit based on their calculation of saturation every day you can water. So it's just like, I'm gonna water the grass for maybe 5 minutes at most in a spot every single day before the sunrise, and let the ground stay saturated as much as possible, or to a healthy amount, not oversaturated. But and I will have to attest that in the 3 or 4 years since I've set up this whole Rydo do-it-yourself irrigation system, my grass looks great where the sprinkler heads can actually get water. There are a couple dead spots where the sprinkler heads are not getting water, I noticed, but where they are actually getting water, it looks amazingly great. It is the best lawn in my neighborhood. It is probably getting a major amount of expense added as far as my water bill, but yeah, that is the trade-off there, and it's doing as much of savings as possible. Inherently, on a bigger scale, the transition from a non-intelligent, a non-smart sprinkler system and a non-smart air conditioner, and this will be more common in the case of air conditioners. Transition from that to even the first generation of intelligence on sprinkler systems and air conditioners is going to cause you to be an incredibly high reward experience. Okay, let's see if this works. This is normal summoned. This can't be put face down, apparently. So yeah, my Ecobee 3, which is really all I think you need these days. I don't think you really need to go to the newest Ecobee. I think does a very nice job to save a lot of money on my air conditioner, and the Rydo 3 Plus would be what I would recommend, but I just have the 3. The only real difference between the 3 and the 3 Plus is that The 3 Plus comes with lifetime valve monitoring, so it will tell you if the valves electronically feel like they're not working and they may have been worn out. You may not really need that, and you definitely wouldn't want to upgrade to $10 a month from paying nothing a month for it. If there was a one-time fee and it was reasonable, I might pay that to upgrade. But yep, the ratio 3 is probably saving me a lot of watering bills if I was using just a regular timer. And I'd probably flood my lawn if I was just using a regular irrigation system controller. It would be programmed wrong. There's a lot of programming to get sprinkler heads to give the right amount of water flow and be set correctly and positioned correctly in their just initial installation. And if you do it wrong, you will create a system that will just consistently overwater in one spot from one sprinkler head and possibly underwater in another spot, and it will just not be balanced. And so if you have, let's say, a dozen sprinkler heads but none of them are watering the same amount, then you'll never be able to get the timing down right, even if you wanted to. And you have to accommodate for a sprinkler head. If it is only doing a 180 pattern from left to right, well, then it needs to be restricted by half of the water flow compared to a sprinkler head that is doing a 360, because you would want them to both, in the same amount of time, complete their cycles. And 180 would be all the way to the left, all the way to the right, maybe all the way to the left, maybe all the way to the right twice for every one 360. And they turn based on the pressure and the water flow themselves, so they should be in sync that way. You can also only put so many sprinkler heads on one line based on your water pressure. That's another problem with building your own do-it-yourself sprinkler head. Sprinkler system is that you are going to be limited to whatever spigot outside you're using instead of main lines pressure. So I can put something here face down. I don't think any of that's going to help. And the math gets even crazier if you're doing like 90 degrees. Generally, a sprinkler head, I don't think you could really properly calculate it for like 45 degrees. That would be a fairly narrow window, or smaller, but yeah, 90 degrees where sprinkler head is just doing around the corner is feasible that you would set it up that way, and more reasonably you would set it up for 270 degrees, I believe, or somewhere around that. Whatever 180 plus 45 plus 90, that would be 270. So that the sprinkler head would be around the corner of a building, and it would get this side and come all the way and get this side, but not hit the walls, because you never want to spray water on the walls of your house or of a building, because that will lead to encouraging of insects to enter your house and rot, certainly, and just hurt it, potentially even loosening your foundation. And it's just a waste of water, frankly. Like, it'd be nice if there was a sprinkler system that would wash the the dirty walls of a house, but that's not realistic. Now I'm talking about do-it-yourself irrigation systems. It's worth pointing out that there is a completely different device not connected to Ratio at all that is also of a consideration now. It is effectively a white box that you mount, or at least you can mount at a fairly high level, and then you can program it with its little dome sprinkler head on top of it to give specific amounts of water at specific distances in specific angles. So it is effectively an automated turret flamethrower that is not throwing flames but throwing water. But it is so precisely programmable, at least it sells itself that way, that you could have one of these, connect it to a hose intake, you can put fertilizer in it, and it will cover a much larger amount of your yard without needing to put anything in the ground or install any other sprinklers. There are some red flags on this device. First of all, I haven't seen anybody really review it. It's fairly new, so maybe at the end of this season I'll see more reviews. But one red flag that would be an object of concern is that you might very well be flinging a lot of water very high in the air that would just evaporate off. So it would be maybe very wasteful to do it that way. But what you save in installing a sprinkler system may go away in water bills because of it. It doesn't really have a home in a traditional yard. Like if you stick it on the ground, maybe animals would mess with it, maybe it would freeze in the winter. Probably should bring it in. It's going to be very expensive. Might get stolen. Seems like it would need some kind of power. So wherever you put it might need electricity. That's one thing irrigation systems get around quite a bit by having the manifold outside and the controllers inside a house or garage. And yeah, it would just be a matter of its programming and its intelligence. Ratios sell themselves on the idea that they are geniuses around watering grasses and they really know what they're doing, and there are technical debates in the forums as far as their algorithms and their systems. And when you set up the whole thing, you do notice that there's a lot going on there, in that they want to know the elevation of an area, they want to know the type of soil you have, they want to know your zip code and locations like that. Just to make sure they know exactly what to, they want to know what type of grass you're growing. And some of those questions are fairly technical. They want to know the flow rate of your hoses. And some of that I definitely just kind of guessed at. As well activate effects, I guess. So anyways, I suppose that's as much warm-up as I can do. Unfortunately, because there was some breakage, some more maintenance and repair that needs to happen to my irrigation system, I'm going to almost certainly spend another day doing that instead of playing Fallout New Vegas, which maybe a little bit of a break in Fallout New Vegas would help. I was able to start streaming. I didn't even mention it earlier today. I am also trying Yep. Yeah, I might play some more Fallout today after this stream. And I was gonna say I'm also trying desperately to get more views on these streams now that Yu-Gi-Oh's not in the title. I ran across this book series called Trapped in a Video Game, spending too much time looking at Amazon.com, and they were on sale, so that caught my eye. Of course, it's not a book series I'd actually read, it's for little kids, 8 to 10-year-olds, but it definitely feels like something I would have loved to read when I was a kid. Captain N was a cartoon that I remember watching the pilot episode of Captain N and Saved by the Bell, because that was all at the same Saturday morning block of cartoons, and then Saved by the Bell, I believe, was at the end of the cartoons. And they did this whole special thing, a special presentation to get people excited about it when it first aired. And the funny thing about Captain N is I probably only watched maybe just that one video, that premiere, and may never have even seen any more of it. And I've never gone back to watch any of it. I imagine it's not really that good. Zelda cartoons and the Mario cartoons much more relevant than Captain N, and all of that was kind of the same block at the same time, the same 30-minute segment. Sometimes you'd get like a Captain N cartoon, sometimes you'd get a Zelda cartoon, sometimes you'd get a Mario cartoon, I think was kind of how that worked, though I might be wrong about that. Yeah, but I definitely have some nostalgia for it. So I imagine that book series, Trapped in a Video Game, might very well be similar to that. The reason I make the comparison, in case I should mention, is because Captain N is this kid that gets sucked into video games. And he almost certainly would have been the first major instance of that. Probably not the first time that general theme has been done, because yeah, the never-ending story is a kid who gets sucked into a book world, and yeah, the what we would call isekais, now Trapped in Another World or In Another World series type of stories, are super popular in Japan, very common nowadays. But yeah, that would have happened multiple times when you started to expand it away from the idea of video games, like kids or adults getting sucked into movies, TVs, books. That's all been going on for a long time, and I would imagine you could trace back that thought pattern and that history all the way back into something like the fairy stories of old English times, where children would be whisked off to a fairyland to, you know, and Labyrinth's another example of that, getting trapped in a fictional fairyland. Yep. I was into Mighty Max toys. Their grotesque visuals appealed to me as a young boy, and that is also a story of a kid getting trapped into a ever universe hopping situation where he's going from world to world. And yeah, going to a different world is pretty common in fantasy, so adding the video game twist on it isn't particularly unique. But what the video game twist does is it creates even less of a need for any kind of like shared rule set or science or explanation of things. Being trapped in a video game uniquely says it's a fictional programmed world where anything and everything could happen just based on what the programmers programmed. The Chronicles of Narnia is a book series. Similar situation. Kids go through the wardrobe in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and end up in a completely different world. The Narnia books, interestingly, let the kids live almost entire lives in Narnia to just return to just about the same time that they had left. I really do have to just jump into the video game news, don't I? At this point. And this is probably as far as we're gonna go with Yu-Gi-Oh! And with this event. Like, I was hoping we would get a bunch of quick disconnects. I could play off screen, but I don't want to. Really. I'd rather play Fallout New Vegas. So, yeah, let's start going through the video game news. The physical version of Assassin's Creed Shadows requires an online connection to install. Ubisoft launched pre-orders for the single-player game on Wednesday. This is the next game in a growing list of games that requires the internet to install. Which, yeah. Evermore, there is a push to ensure everybody gets that day one patch and everyone gets some kind of effectively countdown license that will expire. One of the things that the internet has done has pushed for shorter and shorter DNS domain registration licenses that have to just be renewed more frequently for security reasons. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a connection there, or if it is just the same mentality, really, that they want these games to have a license, perhaps a unique license for per install, per hardware, that requires some online verification. Now, we will see in later news, that they have Sony, the parent company of Sony Interactive Entertainment, has finally put somebody in place and in charge of PlayStation. So, it is very possible that Sony, I think, well, might start pushing more of that for their games. In this case, Assassin's Creed Shadows would be a Ubisoft product, so not Sony in this case. But yeah, it may very well just get pushed more and more. That to have online requirements. And when you get a story like this, you really can't you can't argue the other side very well, because sure, I could say at least it's not always online requirements, but that doesn't make that a good thing, that they're just not as awful as they possibly could be. So I got 650, it would be 2,900 points required. And then the limit one here, imagine if I was to try and copy this, this would say that there is a 1 limit on every single card, so my deck wouldn't make any sense to even try. Yep. And how long is this even going to last? Long enough that we can do the number 2 next time, the number 2 lunar deck. Meanwhile, when you look at like daily quests and festival quests, even playing for 30 minutes gets most of that done. And you're still getting progress on the Game Pass. Who's to say that it isn't mostly the daily quests and the Duel Pass where you're getting your free-to-play gems? It probably is, because you're not really getting many gems at all dueling in ranked or dueling in a festival. Let's see. Marvel's Midnight Suns director worries that the card-based combat kept players away. Do the complex card system keep Marvel's Midnight Suns from being hit? I would argue probably not. I to my own surprise, kind of remember when Marvel Midnight Suns was being advertised, or more accurately was not being properly advertised, and that seems like that was very much the issue. Having an alternate universe where you have all these Midnight Sun versions of Marvel characters in these gold and black outfits didn't get explained in the advertisement that it was an alternate universe, and then having a bunch of advertisements not even telling you that it's a card-based system. I'm not sure I even knew that it was a card-based system until just now. From what I thought it was after it had released by several weeks, I thought it was more of an XCOM style top-down positional placement game, tactical game. And if that was the case, that would have also been not well shown in the trailers and advertisements, which really were just showing cutscenes. I do know that Midnight Suns was praised for having some interesting interactions and interpersonal relationships between the characters, but yeah, definitely not a lot of people reviewed it, not a lot of people talked about it, and I think he is probably saying card-based here, perhaps because he just doesn't really know what was the problem, or because he knows that the problem was the publishing. It is a sad fact that it really is a case that you need the publishers to spend a massive amount of money and do a really good job to promote a game. Otherwise, it just won't catch people's attention. And increasingly, it's been this way for a while, but even now it gets worse. Uh, there's just so many games that get released, and so many games from the past that you could be playing otherwise. It's just really, really difficult for even great games to catch people's attention. We only have to go back as far as like Stellar Blade. There's a game that almost certainly got underpromoted and was going to have a niche audience, but could have tried for a bigger audience. Even Helldivers 2, it's kind of a niche audience. It's not going to get everybody to play it. And we are in the middle now. We're nearing the middle of one of the worst years for games ever, and there's still not a trend of more people going to play old video games or finding the hidden gem games. Specifically when you have a license like Marvel, I feel like there really needs to be some kind of Disney Plus Game Pass element to Marvel content, where a game like this would be given away for free because you own Disney Plus, which would give you Marvel stuff, and that you would get potentially comic books, digital versions of Marvel comics every month on a Marvel Pass as a subsidiary of Disney Pass. And maybe you split that up, and maybe there should be a Marvel Pass, just a monthly fee to give you access to old Marvel games. You certainly could do it. Like, it'd be fairly easy to give trials or limited access to old Marvel Lego games from TT Games, other older Marvel games, Marvel Snap cards, give away old Marvel comics. Every month comes with a $1 off coupon for brand new Marvel comics at any comic book store. You could certainly create something like that to just have Marvel fanboys continue to be Marvel fanboys. Like, the stereotype of Marvel and DC fanboys just being obsessed with Marvel and loving Marvel like crazy, I think even that has pretty much died down quite a bit more recently, in part because the Marvel movies are brought it into the mainstream, making it less cool for the fanboys, I imagine, and in part because Marvel Comics themselves, I just don't imagine have been doing the greatest of jobs. I still think Marvel's probably doing a little bit better than DC is. But yeah, I don't think a complex card system was the main problem, because I definitely didn't hear anything. One of the major problems, though, is the outfits. That particularly in advertising it, the Midnight Suns needed to have classic outfits in the deluxe edition, and they needed to advertise things as classic outfits to start with. And I imagine Marvel told them they couldn't do that. And yeah, this Spider-Man is hardly recognizable. I have no idea if this is Peter Parker, or if Miles Morales is in this outfit, or whoever. Could be a whole new character. Yeah, and I really couldn't tell you who this character is at all. And this might be Negasonic Teenage Warhead. It might be the name of that character, maybe, but this could also be a completely different character. So you have like a picture here, and generally I can recognize Spider-Man and can't recognize the other two based on their outfits and based on their faces. And that's a problem. Diablo 4, we had already kind of talked about this. Season 4 is just called Loot Reborn, and it's overhauling many of the core game systems, just trying to forge a new path that they're hoping the players might enjoy more. Although you still have the seasonality issue. So, I don't know. It still doesn't really feel like I'd want to play Diablo 4. because of the seasonality issue. I don't think I have any articles to show, but I both saw Linus Tech Tips saying that they don't feel like the Steam Deck is relevant because Linus Tech Tips is very much coming from more of a PC first and Windows first experience and looking at it from that direction, and they're much more interested in the ROG Ally X that's coming out. And then I saw a different YouTuber in the exact same day, in a matter of really hours, make a video saying how Steam Deck has won the console wars or the PC wars without even trying. So very contrasting opinions. And the other videos very much coming from the perspective of, if you are a PC gamer, if you want something that's like a console but isn't going to be limited to just consoles and console games, then yes, the Steam Deck is the way to go. Whereas the ROG Ally and the Ally X and any other device that's not going to run their own custom Linux and support their own custom Linux or run SteamOS, you're just going to run into the Windows 10, Windows 11 issues that a lot of gamers don't want to deal with, and people just don't want to deal with in general. Linus Tech Tips criticized the Steam Deck for being on, I believe, RDNA 3 instead of 4, or RDNA 2 instead of 3. So basically a generation behind on the CPU. But the Steam Deck is fairly price conscious, and so I'd assume that's the reason. And we may get a Steam Deck 2 fairly quickly that is just a upgraded CPU and may not really change that much. I also watched 2 YouTube videos as far as that we talked about in the last stream. A Super Mario 64 door. They finally, after years, figured out a way to glitch and reach this door from the wrong side. I watched that video. It was fairly interesting, but nothing really that special, other than it just took them that long to figure out a way to do it. It's not even likely to improve speed runs because it takes longer to set up. And then I watched a video on the recompiled program for Nintendo 64 games. And yeah, it is on GitHub, which seems like that is a scary prospect. It seems like it doesn't have any of Nintendo's code in it, but that really wouldn't stop Nintendo and possibly GitHub colluding to take it down anyways. And so I would recommend downloading what exists now just for your own use if you're ever going to use it. It does certainly pave a whole new way forward where you might just take a break from trying to get a Steam Deck to be an emulation system for Nintendo 64 games and instead and earlier games, and instead just recompiling every single Nintendo 64 game you can. And we're not quite at that point, but there feels like there will be a point where it'll just make sense to have recompiled versions of every Nintendo 64 games running on Linux or running on Windows, and you probably won't see any difference in performance between the Windows and the Linux version, and there'll just be no emulator involved there and no emulation involved there, although it does integrate some modding emulation features to add widescreen and like ray tracing and things like that. I think that will be potentially in the final versions too. But at the end of the day, it will be a very different experience if you have a Steam Deck that just has an application called Ocarina of Time, and you launch it and it just launches like a regular game or program in Linux, instead of what would happen now, which is you would run an emulator, and the emulator might have a front end. There might be some extra information that the front end has scraped information for, so you could get some historical information, but there would be launching into the front end, launching into the emulator, running the emulator, probably updating the front end in the emulator fairly frequently, and still not getting as good of performance. Now, this is specifically just for Nintendo 64 games at the moment, but it is very possibly the way future for all game consoles after Nintendo 64, is that the idea of emulation on anything newer is just not going to be worth it, and recompiling will be the way forward. I doubt it would be particularly efficient to recompile every single NES game, considering how even a low-powered computer, anything above a Raspberry Pi, is likely to perfectly emulate a NES game anyways, and add all the RetroArch, rewind and pause and save state features, which recompiling would have to mod in all of that, all those features. So I kind of just question whether anybody would spend the effort for older games, but maybe recompilation will just be the way forward, and enthusiasm will be very high around all of that. What I would want to see, though, is that the recompiler would be able to have specific libraries and code for every single game that the Nintendo 64 ever supported, instead of potentially being a different recompiler program per game or per groups of games, because it would get very messy. Eventually there would be just a step-by-step guide where it'd say, put in all of your Nintendo 64 ROMs in this folder, and then the recompiler would just scan them and recompile them in bulk. But right now it seems like it's not gonna, they're not really thinking it will work that way. Moving on with other news. 2 of the Joy-Con drift lawsuits have been dismissed after 5 years. Nintendo apologized for the issue in 2020, but it continues to appear in some controllers. Nintendo seemingly never really changed too much in the internals to prevent drift from happening, nor did they ever admit guilt. So, if we want to get specific, this would be Diaz versus Nintendo and Carbajal versus Nintendo. Let's see. Was there specific reasons for the dismissals? Well, Video Games Chronicle not really saying why they've been dismissed, and not even if they've been dismissed with prejudice or not. So they might have been dismissed. Yeah. GameFiles reports that both Nintendo and the parents who brought the suits on behalf of their children called for the cases to be dismissed. So it seems like they probably just came to an agreement. Yeah, some kind of settlement, I would imagine. And inherently, that is one of the flaws I think that exists in the US legal system, is that if you bring up an issue that the court should look at, you shouldn't be able to mutually agree via bribes to drop that issue, particularly if it's a class action suit, which I think these had been made in the class action suits, but maybe I'm wrong about that. At the point that it's a class action suit and it's supposed to represent everybody, it seems ridiculous that you could just dismiss it. At the point it becomes a class action suit, it probably should be a case where the government is running the case themselves for the benefit of all of society. But yeah, Nintendo certainly knows its way around lawyers. Video Games Chronicle also says that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI, and Foam Stars all sold less than expected, according to the Square Enix president. Internal targets weren't met, Tashi Kiryu reportedly said. Of course, this would be the exact same thing that Square Enix has been saying for years about almost every single game. So you can't really take too much from this. It's just always the case that it feels like the management of Square Enix is always expecting way too much. That being said, from my own personal opinion, I had completely forgotten that Foam Stars existed. That's a pretty big failure there, in that that should have been a Splatoon competitor, and I'm not even sure Foam Stars is still playable. I have to think they canceled it after a couple of weeks and shut it down, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth should have had lower expectations anyways. It was both released too late and too early, in the sense that it was released too early because I imagine there's still a large number of people trying to get through the first Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth being the second game in the trilogy, in the remake trilogy. So yeah, too early for that reason. Also too late because there would probably have been more sales if Final Fantasy VII Remake was just one game, or even if it was a trilogy of games all released at the same time. Now, Final Fantasy XVI, it definitely seems like that sold pretty poorly, and it just wasn't a very well promoted and advertised game. I think you can definitely go back to Square Enix being the publisher here and blame them for not promoting and advertising the games in the correct way well enough too. It's not really the case that I'm getting flooded with news or advertisements for video games. It is, yeah, I very rarely see a video game ad, although in fairness I do my best to not see ads at all. But when I do see an ad, it's not for video games. The closest time I ever see video game ads is when they have big events and a Sony Direct probably did promote these games, but I can also say all of the Direct presentations in at least the last 6 months, I've paid fairly close attention to all of them and watched them all, and they're all boring, or they're overwhelming, one or the other. It's either too many announcements together, so by the next day I've forgotten everything, or they're boring because they have almost nothing to say. And maybe there's some timing issues certainly there too, of some games just getting announced years before they actually get released. Apparently Dead by Daylight has a Dungeons and Dragons and a Castlevania chapters coming out. Dead by Daylight still doing an amazingly good job of keeping players playing, since it is just an asynchronous 4 versus 1 gameplay experience, and it doesn't seem like it has any real story or connection to it, So they can just throw. I wonder if this is the Mind Flayer. It very well could be. But yeah. They really can't just throw any characters into the game and it makes sense and it works. Let's see. Here's a gameplay clip. 2 versus 8. So I guess a question to ask here, 2 versus 8 is a new play mode instead of 4 versus 1. A good question to ask here is Dead by Daylight a better game than Fortnite? It's definitely not played as much than Fortnite, but yeah, that really didn't show any new content. But yeah, Fortnite has a lot going on around it though, and I think there probably is just more to do in Fortnite, so I would suspect Fortnite, if you can ever define something as better, it's probably a slightly better game than Dead by Daylight. Both seem to be very good games for their audiences, though. Moving on, the Rockstar co-founder Dan Houser's new studio is making an open-world action-adventure game. I feel like we'd already talked about this. Absurd Ventures is seeking to deliver the best-in-class combat and third-person action across multiple game modes. These descriptions tell us almost nothing, although action-adventure is not typically what Rockstar made. Yeah, I don't think you would call any of the GTA games really an adventure game, and frankly you'd struggle to even define them as an action game. Ubisoft has cancelled the free-to-play spin-off of The Division Heartland, which, okay, that was probably a dumb thing for them to even announce until they were completely finished and ready to release it, because you could inherently make some kind of spin-off mode in another game and that costs money, and then if it doesn't really work for the main Division game, then you could spin it off as a free-to-play game. It does not make a lot of sense to me that a lot of these game projects start by having their monetization style selected before you've even thought about what the game actually is going to be. That the first thing out of the mouths of people making games pitches is it's a free-to-play game, it's a base pay plus live service microtransaction game. It's just all about the money before you even mention what kind of game it is or who your target audience is and things like that. Ubisoft clearly has several announcements here. They've laid off 1,700 workers on the path to its highest net bookings yet, which I don't know if that really means too much to me. I would say it does seem like Ubisoft has slowed down the number of games they've been making, so they probably don't need as many workers. We could also say Ubisoft has a tumultuous history of employer-employee relationships in the past decade. They also have Skull and Bones, I believe was the name of the pirate game they released, and that didn't succeed particularly well, so yep. Ubisoft has always felt a little too big and probably would benefit the French people and France overall if Ubisoft was kind of forced to split as being a little bit too much of a monopoly as far as game development in France. If there were two Ubisofts competing against each other, that would probably be better. Or if not two or three companies split from Ubisoft. Of course, the mileage varies widely on how much that really works when the government comes in and splits up a company. Let's see. This isn't video game related, but the DCU is having swimsuit variants of their comic covers. And yep, seems fairly heavy on more male guys. And this time they have the Trinity not even in swimsuits. So you're gonna have a swimsuit variant that's not even in swimsuits. Here you have, this feels like this is all the same artist doing this too. Here you have the Teen Titans. And here you have Harley Quinn drawn in a weird way. Then that's probably Nightwing. And this is the Flash. And then I guess this is Batman. Does seem like it is different artists. Anyways, that doesn't have anything to do with video games. I just wanted to look at that and saw it on my Twitter. Logically, it'd probably make more sense if I had two Twitters, one for just my own personal interest and one for YouTube news, but that would be too much work. May's PlayStation Plus game catalogs and classic titles have been announced. Red Dead Redemption 2, Deceive Inc., and Crime Boss Rock City. That's barely news. Apparently Accessibility Month is coming. Global Accessibility Awareness Day is coming. Not even a month. Not sure if people with disabilities really want their own logo or should use their own logo. Particularly in the case of video games, they, I imagine, want to just be treated the same and experience games as much the same as they can. Microsoft has made a lot of hay in the past years pretending like they care about people with disabilities when they really don't seem like they have ever done too much. It's not like they give away accessibility controllers. It's not like they've really even developed the accessibility controllers themselves, because they didn't. So yeah, this whole article is just highlighting what little they've done. So you can apparently earn an ambassador badge on your profile, and then they're going to do some support articles. Yeah. See, they have a pre-ordered for the Proteus controller. So another partner is making a controller called the Proteus. Let's open that and see what that looks like. And then they say they're going to have improved filtering and sorting in my games and apps on consoles. And then they're going to be receiving feedback from those. One of the things definitely to do is to have more disabled people involved in the development, and I don't really think I've seen any of that happening. But yeah, unless you're having the people with the disabilities involved, there's very little likelihood that you're going to invent something that's actually helpful. You just need that feedback. Okay, yeah, I've seen this before. There's Proteus controller. It is a bunch of cubes that can be configured in different ways, which is an interesting thought, but I don't know if that really means it would work well. See here, seems like you can just snap them together. And I definitely have seen toys that look like this, and so it feels like they're reusing some molds. There is definitely one thing to be said around this Proteus concept. Well, first of all, I don't know how many different ways these can connect to each other. If I was to guess, this ring pattern is different connection points, and so something like this maybe snaps into something more like this, so you can connect in different places. But it might be more the case that all of these buttons only snap in on these sides, and that there might really only be one data connection per cube, one input to the next cube, one output to the next cube. But this does have one advantage of the other Microsoft partnered accessibility controller, which just has the two giant drum pads / buttons, in that this is much smaller and much more customizable. Might be harder to sell, certainly, though. But yeah, I can see how this works. Take note that the ABXY here is upside down with these triggers and bumps being done with pointer fingers, and then an analog stick with the thumb. And yeah, I don't think you're actually going to ever get it very small. I think you're likely always going to have 3 or 4 of these devices connected. Seems like they maybe have some half circles so you can get more of an angle here, turning this into a one-handed joystick. I guess one of the questions also to ask here is, are these following the standards to attach these kinds of things to a wheelchair? Plug mount cover. Yeah. See if we have anything under the FAQ. We can check. Can you combine more? Yes, you can. Can I have more than 2 analog sticks? At least 2 analog, at least 2 left analog, at least 2 right analogs. It's going to be Bluetooth controller, so it might be slow. Can you reprogram it? No. So it probably won't ever work on anything but Xbox. Can you swap individual buttons? Can you change the button size? Both of that is no. What about stick drift? Are they Hall effects? No. This probably is a very expensive device. Works well for one-handed gamers, gamers with chronic pain, and generally anyone who is still able to press standard buttons and inputs, but find the layout of a standard controller problematic and cannot hold a controller. Has it been tested with disabled gamers? They say yes. Can you mount the controller? Yes, we've developed a peripheral to allow you to mount your controller. The mount takes a 1/4 thread. We'll be sharing more details soon. Yep. So that might be the right thread, or that might be totally a non-standard thread, which can be an issue. Does it work on the PS5? No. Does it work on the Switch? No. Does it work on Windows? Yes. Linux, I would assume no. We can't verify just yet, but hopefully. Can I say game profiles? Yes. Can I customize the LEDs? Yes. It has batteries in it. So what is the price? Let's ask that question. So expensive, they are hiding it at $255. Inherently, the most recent wave of people trying to claim that they are doing something good for disabled people are not really significantly reducing the amount of cost for these extra custom controller setups. They just aren't. $255 is a joke. A very high quality Xbox controller is $90. I would expect that an accessibility might have a bit of a markup at $125. Double that, you're taking advantage at that point. And yes, it is not as much of a taking an advantage as it has been in the past, where certainly insurance companies are getting charged thousands, tens of thousands of dollars for devices that cost $5, and then the insurance is passing those costs on as premiums to every other person who has to have health insurance. But this still is just not really realistic. And yes, you can make all the arguments you want to say that they had to 3D print and test and invent a whole new technology system, but and there's some research and development in that, but you can't really just pass that price on to early adopters. And they're saying this is 15% off. By the way, they really want $300. $300 is more than an Xbox Series S just for the controller. Yeah, I would also not being able to handle this. I question this connection concept. I would really question whether these devices aren't going to just fall off. I'm not sure if they're actually being held on magnetically, or if this white bit here is somehow locked in. But yeah. There is definitely a point to also be made that there is a fairly famous guy on YouTube who makes custom controllers on demand, custom for each person, and I don't think he charges that much either for his work. And because he's making it on demand, custom for each person, it has much more of a higher likelihood that it can actually be used by the person. There is a real danger here that this produce controller is very unusable for a high number of people. And it definitely is way too expensive to just be an expensive controller that you could sell to non-disabled people, which is really what you would want to get to anyways, is that you would want the you would want to create a system where even non-disabled people would say, hey, I want that controller. That makes sense. Here's some of the 3D printed analog stick adapters based on how disabled your hand is, or even nub might be. But the rest of the controller seems to be not 3D printed. So they're making an odd split here between very rarely requested 3D printed parts and the default parts that come in the kit, which don't include any of that as far as I can tell. But yeah, once again, worth pointing out that Microsoft trying to get good press for doing very, very little themselves. They're not even donating money as far as I could tell. Let's see, why did I click on Dead Island? Dead Island 2 put out a version 1.1 hotfix. Apparently there was some kind of technical issues. I don't care enough to go into any further details, however, so I'm going to leave it at that. Amazon, or more accurately I'd say Amazon Prime Video, has greenlit a Tomb Raider TV series from Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Phoebe Waller-Bridge was she worked on Fleabag. She's going to be the writer and executive producer, though, so she was a British actress, screenwriter, and producer. Okay, so I'm not sure if she was an actress in Fleabag or if she was just a screenwriter or a producer. You're going to, I think, have slightly more difficult of a time with Tomb Raider, considering how many Tomb Raider movies have already been made. And everything up to this point has indicated that Tomb Raider only really would work like an Indiana Jones movie in small bursts. I really have to question how you're going to make a TV series around Tomb Raider. Even if Amazon Prime is flipping the bill and paying a massive amount of money, I just don't know what you can do with it. I would hope that they're not just trying to retell the stories and events of the rebooted series, because that didn't work particularly well. But yeah, I just don't know where you end one episode in a Tomb Raider series. Yeah. It feels like at best it should be a mini series of here's 4 or 5 hour and a half movie length things. I guess you probably look to something like the Librarians movies and the Librarians TV series and try to do something like that, but less silly. Yeah, I can't help but think that the higher reception that Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Amazon Prime has led to greenlighting this. Although it's also worth pointing out, something being greenlit doesn't mean much of anything at all either. It's just they're going to start production. It could be canceled at any time. I guess what would be the weirdest twist here is if you bring in a British actress, screenwriter, and producer, and she just pushes Tomb Raider back into the way it used to be advertised many, many decades ago by putting her in hot pants and a tank top and just showing off as much cleavage and butt as possible. And they really pushed Lara Croft to be that femme fatale, men want her idol that she once was. and tried to get away from the reboot, which made her more of a human being with cares and concerns and less of an object of just sexual desire. That would be an interesting twist, certainly. If there was a reversion there, but I imagine that's not what's going to happen. And one can hope that it's not going to somehow be just way too SJW-y on the Tomb Raider series. Yeah. It's easy to avoid that with Lara Croft, but I could certainly see somebody trying to inject like SJW stuff into Tomb Raider TV series, and I imagine there would be a huge rejection and pushback. There's a lot of room for failure, I think, there. The Unity Create boss, Mark Whittam, is resigning, according to GameDeveloper.com. Whittam will receive multiple payments worth over $800,000 upon leaving the company, so he's resigning with a massive golden parachute. I don't know if this really is so much video game related, but the Reddit GameStop let's screw over the short sellers of GameStop have been fairly active recently. Seems like the hedge funds are trying to pull some more shenanigans. As far as I can do, I'm not involved in it at all. As far as I can tell, the hedge fund owners are trying to pull some shenanigans and cut their losses to the bare minimum, whereas the GameStonks people who bought shares of GameStop are still trying to hold or even buy more stocks to make the hedge funders who tried to short GameStop and effectively bankrupt it suffer as much as possible. What I saw that seemed to explain this best is that the short sellers from 3 years ago may have bought something called a leap, which was, I think, maybe an insurance policy of some sort, some kind of weird financial offering, and now the leaps are expiring 3 years later, and so now they're once again trying to avoid losing massively. As far as Unity Create, I'd have to double check to even know what that is, whether that is connected to Unity. I guess it is, because they're talking about the Unity runtime fee. But yeah, I guess you take this as just insider information and move on. Here's the story I talked about earlier. Sony has appointed 2 PlayStation CEOs to replace Jim Ryan, which nothing says poor leadership more than being unable to find one person to be a leader in your subsidiary. And so that goes straight to the top of Sony, the main Sony. So PlayStation Studios boss Herman Hulst and a Platform Experience Group Senior Vice President Hideki Nishino are preparing to step up. So it seems like there's a Western guy and an, I assume, Japanese guy, both supposed to be parallel CEOs, which that won't work. I imagine this also screams that Sony wants at least a Japanese person to have some fairly high control, but I don't know if that really means anything good. The whole Stellar Blade censorship thing happened with a Japanese interim CEO, so I wouldn't expect too much. I think Sony overall is embracing the censorship concept more, and I doubt the Western guy is going to be anti-censorship. They're implementing a new multi-pronged leadership struggle, which this screams them saying that they can't replace Jim Ryan. And I don't know if there's really any truth to that, or if they're just bad at it. So Holst will be responsible for developing, publishing, and business operations of Sony's first-party content, which they don't have a ton of that right now. So, yeah. I don't know what to really take from this. We will see how that works. And frankly, we won't really see a major impact until years down the road, I imagine. Because somebody who's in charge now is going to start greenlighting projects and making decisions that won't be released and announced for 3 or 4 years. Square Enix's share price has dropped 16%, or nearly 16%, following its underwhelming financial results. Price plummeted as soon as the Tokyo Stock Exchange opened. Maybe that's a good time to buy. Maybe not. Depends on whether you think Square Enix would ever bounce back up or not. We may very well see a lot of Japanese companies just go out of business for a new generation of video game companies in Japan. Nintendo will be around, and Sony will be around, and Sega will be around, but it is very possible that they all might make very little, or in Nintendo's case they'll have a bunch of second-party developers making games for them from the new generation of game companies. PlayStation 5 hit 59 million. I guess this is units shipped of the PlayStation 5, as Helldivers 2 breaks PlayStation's launch sales records. Live service game itself has sold 12 million copies in 12 weeks. This may be the first case I've seen ever, if at least in a very long time, where a controversy happened and yet the fandom was still strong enough to overcome that controversy and continue playing the game just due to enjoying the game. Which that really is a testament to the quality of Helldivers 2, I imagine. Yeah, here we have Helldivers 2 sales topping 12 million. Here we have PlayStation 5 shipments topping 59.3 million. HBO has released the first official Last of Us Season 2 images. Again, these are all on Twitter, though, and nobody wants to pay to show the pictures themselves. Why don't they just download the images and put them on websites? Seems just ridiculous not to do that. And let them get... Yeah, I don't think you'd really get sued for that, and I don't think Twitter can do anything to really stop you from downloading images. They can try, but I've never seen that really work for anybody who even has half a brain worth of technical knowledge. We had already kind of talked about this, but Video Games Chronicle put out an article saying the UK government says there's no legal requirement for games to remain playable. The Stop Killing Games campaign is seeking changes in UK law regarding older titles. Inherently, I imagine that is the case in almost every country, is that they would need new laws. Currently, the campaign has 23,001 signatures and would need to reach 100,000 to be debated in the UK parliamentary. Hooded Horse co-founder says publishers should ditch the horrible recoup clauses to help developers. It's fundamentally stupid to have to recoup terms where publishers protect all of the downside risks and recover all of the money first. This is, I'm sure, something every dev would love to see happen, but I see no way that's actually going to happen from the publisher side. And inherently, the publisher's contracts and offers were agreed to, and they do make sense that you're going to pay a development company a lot of money to develop a game, and that money is going to go towards keeping your business running and paying your staff while that game is being developed for 3 or 4 years, and then they want to be paid that money back, plus I imagine some interest, considering it's taking over the course of years, before they would hand the rights of the game back to the developer, or before they would start paying residuals. If anything, I think you should probably argue that publishers should do away with, we want the residuals in perpetuity forever after they've recouped, because that's the less fair thing. That's when a publisher is getting paid money just after they've already made back their investment, just for doing nothing more. They don't even have to continue to advertise the game. All of these problems would be solved very much by self-publishing, and if consoles were just better at allowing people to self-publish, you probably wouldn't use a publisher if you can get the funding some other way, which is a big if, to actually develop it. But yeah, this is very much a public statement that would need better explanation for the public to really understand it or side with it. And even if the public did understand it and side with them, it's still just making a private agreement between the publisher and the developer public, trying to get gamers on your side. But the other way to fund game development just doesn't work. We see it Fig, Kickstarter. There's just not enough money that they can get for the $1 million plus budgets that your average game costs. The Saints Row reboot was likely the lowest selling in the franchise. Developer Volition was closed down following the failure of the reboot. I would say that's probably a no duh. Yeah, there's really no reason to think it wasn't. Terrible concept and terrible game in its final product. One major issue here is that it just shouldn't have been called Saints Row. And that's something I also feel about Fallout New Vegas, is that Fallout New Vegas could just be called New Vegas and not set in the Fallout universe. And you could make a game like Fallout New Vegas today set outside the Fallout universe. So if this had just been called, instead of Saints Row, like Desperados or something like that, where it was a Mexican gang in a New Mexico type setting, and it played a lot like Saints Row but didn't have any of the baggage or the high expectations of Saints Row, you would have done better. It still would have been a terrible game, likely. Like, that game just got shoved out and was garbage, but then expectations would have been lower too. If anything, this headline is good news for gamers, because it says that at least some early access reviews do reach the ears of gamers and did prevent a lot of gamers from wasting their money or having to seek refunds for an incredibly broken, unplayable game. Sega blames falling profits on challenging conditions in Europe. The company has recently implemented reforms across its European operations by cutting jobs and canceling projects. Yeah. I don't know what specifically are the challenging things in Europe. Are they talking about Russia, Ukraine? Are they talking about Brexit still? Are they talking about just uh, something completely different? Or is there really no actual thing they're talking about, and is it just Sega, a Japanese company, blaming their European subsidiaries for their problems? I would argue that you could describe Japan as having challenging conditions also. And at a certain level, Sega shouldn't be having falling profits, but on a bigger level, every company should have falling profits, like, because the concept of every company having profit every quarter always is just something that cannot stay. It needs, we need minor bubbles to burst, or we're going to have a major bubble burst that will lead to a recession or possibly a depression. So if we can just cool overinflated expectations on companies, that would be a great thing. Let's see, the Mortal Kombat 2 movie has been given a 2025 release date. I'd assume this is a continuation of the most recent Mortal Kombat 1 movie. Yosuke Saito is working on a new project with Yoko Taro and Kiichi Okabe. It might be near, it might not be near, is the subheadline here from Gamatsu. This guy always covers his face. Not that it's scarred or anything, he's just weird and shy. But yeah, I think that this guy was the guy that worked on Majora's Mask, and thus the face looks like some of the characters from Majora's Mask. Everything should point to this being a new Nier game for the success of Nier Automata. It'd be very silly for them to not make a new Nier game, but if they made something and it wasn't called Nier, I imagine the fandom would still play it and be excited about it. So whatever story they want to tell is fine by me. I wouldn't want to see some management come in and say it must be a Nier game because we think having Nier in the title will sell better. It is also worth pointing out that some of the mobile Nier games, spin-off games, did particularly poorly and have been, I think, mostly delisted. These are fairly big names, I imagine, but I don't recognize any of them. I do recognize this guy's face, or his fake face. There is very possibly a point where in the future it will become much more common for people with social anxiety to walk around in masks and faces, or just for fashion reasons walking around in masks and faces. But then there is also some security issues that really only allows that to happen in places like Japan. And I imagine this guy only puts on the helmet when a photo is being taken or he's doing a press presentation. I imagine he actually walks around the office very often without the helmet on. But yeah, there are major security issues as far as just wearing masks and people trying to rob people, or people on the run hiding their identity. And so I imagine in New York, there's in New York City, Manhattan, there's probably an anti-mask law. I know several big cities have them around the world that would get somebody like this arrested if the police really did care, which they probably wouldn't. Super Mario Land, Alleyway, and Baseball have been added to Nintendo Switch Online, which to me makes me think that that's all they have left that they can really add is Game Boy games. Alleyway is an Arkanoid game, Arkanoid clone. Baseball is literally just baseball. Super Mario Land is one of relevancy that you'd actually want to play. But yeah, every new announcement, it seems like they are running out of anything interesting to release or announce. Yeah. And I imagine there's a high number of kids who have no interest in playing a Game Boy game that would be grayscale, 4 shades of grayscale, I believe 240 by 240 pixels, and very small games, even at that. The mobility factor of the original Game Boy was a major selling point because it was either play no video games or play baseball or alleyway while you're in a car driving to school or in a car going on vacation. Nowadays, every single kid has a cell phone, or they have at least access to their parents' cell phones. They can download and play an infinite number of video games via cell phone. They have chargers, so you're not limited to a few hours of battery life in a car. And yeah, there's just a very different experience there. Yeah. And with that different experience, there's much higher expectations on as far as what kind of games you would play. Even though cell phone games are still pretty low quality, they are nowhere as simplistic and low quality as something like Alleyway and Baseball, I imagine, are. So if a kid has a Switch in their car in modern days, why in the world would they be playing these games? There's so much better Switch games to play. Let's see. It is basically the same story. Yoko Taro's new game might be near. It might not be near. Maybe he would take that concept to its fullest and release a game under a title, and then at the very end of the credits add near to the end of to the title. So if it was say if the final title of the game was Machina, Near Machina, then they might take that concept and just sell a game called Machina and then reveal in the last cutscene that it's in the Near universe. That'd be somewhat of an interesting twist, but it's been done before. Certainly, is you have little Easter eggs connecting like Shadow of the Colossus to its predecessor game, which Eco, I believe, is the name of that game. Yeah. The Dread Out Remastered Collection has been announced for the PS5 and Switch. It's probably not that big of news. And then WWE 2K24 ECW update adds a barbed wire baseball bat, more hidden weapons. The DLC also marks CM Punk's return to WWE games after a decade. It is interesting to mention CM Punk and then show Cactus Jack, one of Mick Foley's characters, with a barbed wire bat. You would think that they would show CM Punk in the screenshot. I'm not sure if CM Punk is still in trouble for the real world fight he had backstage at ECW. But we also know WWE is still in trouble, even though they're not really saying anything new and trying to hope people will forget as far as the Vince McMahon allegations. If WWE really wanted to do something amazing, they would probably have tried. Well, bringing in The Rock is probably your smartest move, But I think you might have gotten a better reception if they had brought in Mick Foley to be in charge of the WWE. But I doubt he actually wants to do it. A Beyblade game called Beyblade X Zone, I assume that's how you'd pronounce that, has been announced for Switch and PC. And I imagine kids every now and then still like Beyblades. Seems like there might even be a physical Beyblade device here connecting to the Switch device. I wonder if this means there's a new Beyblade anime coming out to promote it. Of course, this is also a great way to highlight the ridiculousness and the evolution of animes, and in general, and animes in particular, to promote toys to kids. That there really is not a reason for your anime characters to have part yellow, part blue hairstyles, wild hairstyles sitting up, or highlights. It used to be done in animes where they'd have different hairstyles or hair colors so you could tell the difference between people, but the resolution and the art styles have improved well enough that it's very easy to tell the difference. And a lot of that also came from mangas, where the black and white of a manga needed different art styles to tell the characters apart. This is kind of ridiculous hair makeup or face makeup too. This is due out November 14th in Japan. I also wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't come to the West, or if it comes very late to the West. And yeah, Team Meat tweeted about this New York, Dublin, Ireland portal art concept, which doesn't have much to do with video games, but it is worth pointing out the censorship that happened here very quickly. First of all, whoever set up this portal didn't think anything through and was probably expecting this to end in controversy fairly quickly so they could take it away and maybe sell it to a private collector after it being in the public. The general idea is that you have two of these Stargate-like portals, which are just cameras and big screens, one in Manhattan, New York City, one in Dublin, Ireland. And within like the first day, somebody in Dublin, Ireland pulled up a picture of the 9/11 towers on fire during the Twin Towers attack, and put a picture of that to the New York City tourists, and nothing really came from that other than it got reported on that, yeah, there's going to just be a percentage of people who are going to be rude or think it's funny, and so nothing happened on that. Then the next day, a OnlyFans actress, a model, which you could probably describe almost anybody who does OnlyFans as a actress or model, and so yeah, you could argue somebody who did OnlyFans once 5 years ago still could be described that way. Anyways, but in this case, it's an active OnlyFans actress model, it seems, got in Dublin, Ireland, stood in front of the portal and lifted her shirt and exposed her bare breasts, at which point the organization that was running the portals freaked out and shut it down. Now, it's worth pointing out that it's in the New York City since 1993. I believe non-sexual toplessness of women has been allowed and legalized. Now, she was bouncing up and down and showing her breasts, so maybe you could argue that's sexualized, maybe you can't. But you're projecting and distributing the toplessness across different countries and across the internet, so there might be some extra elements there and risks there. It definitely feels like the first thing you would have done here is you would have had a fairly large delay, and you would have just tried to hide a 7-second delay as, oh, it's just transmitting data from such a far distance, so that you could always dump out like a radio station would, and just somebody watching it 24/7 pressing a button to dump out the video. And that's probably how you would fix that. I imagine they're not going to bother to fix it. As far as I could see, I'm not sure if toplessness is legal in Dublin, Ireland or not, but I imagine it happens frequently and nobody complains about it. There is definitely some concerns there that you would have tourists in either city just with kids. Like, here's a baby. Not that babies really need to be protected from seeing boobs, but whatever. So yeah, there's some censorship going on this art piece. Yep. There's also some censorship going on YouTube always, but I will talk about Censored Gaming's latest YouTube compilation video being rated 18 plus, which is a weird decision, but it kind of makes sense from an overly cautious, way too cautious perspective. But let's go through the news in order here. The PlayStation 5 has shipped almost 5 times more Xbox Series, more than the Xbox Series X and S in Q1, a research firm estimates. That's very believable. Xbox Series X's and S's have been available in abundance for a long time. PS5's less long. Arguably, maybe people should slow down on buying PS5 since there's an assumption that the PS5 Pro is just around the corner. But yeah, everything screams that the Xbox is not doing great. I don't know what they can really do to fix that. They're going to have to twist in a direction and hope that they can make a Steam Deck competitor, would be my guess. Or they can make a cheaper console that's still better than the Switch 2, while the the PlayStation 5 Pro and the PlayStation 5 would just be perhaps too expensive. But if they could find a cushy middle, or if they can do something that Sony is clearly not prepared to do, like Sony can't just make a Steam Deck competitor at the moment, because then the PlayStation Portal would have to be admitted to be a failure, and they're not ready to do that. Let's see, Samurai Warriors 4DX is now available for PC worldwide. That is not interesting enough information to be talked about as big news. So let's talk about censored gaming. So YouTube age restricted 18 plus the Yu-Gi-Oh anime video. He's asking people to report it to keep it professional and brief. Well, he's saying all the reporting in the video is kept professional and brief. And then he also says if it was the thumbnail, they could have just taken down the thumbnail. And he immediately appealed it, and they immediately rejected it. And yeah, so he is doing the complaint on Twitter, which is the only way to actually get anything done. Now, I assume, and YouTube will never say, the decision here is to say the content being shown, as he talks about censorship, should be 18 plus, because for kids, an authority that YouTube is willing to bow down to has already censored the content. So if we were to take it to a different level, and I imagine they are way more cautious around age gated, underage content than they would be around political content. But if you were to take the same logic that I think YouTube is using here, if, say, Stalin had censored or burned books on certain topics, or Hitler, or whoever you want to use as your obvious bad guy example here, the equivalent would be YouTube saying, yeah, we're going to age gate your video because you're talking about content that Stalin has already censored. Or, China's a more recent one. If you're talking about Tiananmen Square massacre, and YouTube were to say, we are age gating all videos about the Tiananmen Square massacre because a respected authority that we are willing to kowtow to in the Chinese Communist Party has already censored that. That would be the only logic I really see there. Otherwise, it is just a case that YouTube is being way too conscious, or more accurately, some underpaid, overworked employee in a third world country for YouTube is being way too cautious. I do think the thumbnail here is probably a bit of a problem, and it's not even a great thumbnail overall, so maybe you should have been a little bit more cautious. Inherently, I think it is also just kind of weird for censored gaming to try to have videos around anime, and so maybe this will just help push him to focus on video games and censorship in video games exclusively. I wouldn't be surprised if this is getting red flagged, because just anything with Yu-Gi-Oh in the name, talking about a cartoon, is just red flagged, because the algorithm is probably really bad about recommending this to the right people, and so I wouldn't be surprised if this algorithm would recommend this to kids fairly highly. But yeah, censorship is happening to Censored Gaming, a news source that tries to report on censorship. It is ironic, to say the least. And this new CEO, not that new, what was he talking about here? He's retweeting Hot Ones being on a interview. He was promoting a lot of AI stuff that they are rolling out on Google in general. You can see a Wall Street Journal comparison as far as who is using their TV time, with seems like Disney being the highest, YouTube being the second highest. Although it's kind of hard to tell. Like, this blue versus this blue is fairly close. So I would assume that this is Paramount and this is Warner. If you could get Paramount and Warner merged, they'd probably be above that. If you could get Netflix merged with anything, it could probably get above that. The number of things they're listing here is noticeably missing Amazon Prime data, which, yeah, for at least 1 month there with the Fallout TV series, that number is probably much higher. Oh, and then the other thing is, with the EU elections coming up, YouTube is going to try very hard to put out what they approve of as far as election news, and they will undoubtedly censor any small-time content creator who wants to talk about the EU elections at all. So I guess maybe he's doing everybody a favor there by saying don't even bother talking about the EU elections, because the algorithm is going to be highly corrupted to only promote the biggest of news sources. I certainly see that in the United States too, where if I'm watching a certain newsworthy recent topic, all of a sudden I will get recommendations for CNBC or CNN clips, channels I never watch and have never given any indication I would want to watch. Yeah. Let's see, Child's Play Charity, May 13th, has hired 3 people, or they funded the, I'm not sure if they've actually hired people at these hospitals to be technical specialists, arguably. They're kind of salesmen for Child's Play Charity more than anything, but they have job listings there. I imagine you need like either an RN or a MD to get these positions. It'd actually be interesting to see, is to be a technology specialist, to work with children in hospitals and help them play the game cards and video games. What are they looking for as far as the requirements? Overseas bedside gaming program, including inventory setup and maintenance, installs, maintains. It's kind of an IT job, but they want you to have a bachelor's degree in child or human development, child life education, information technology or related field, minimum 1 year of digital and or gaming technology experience required. Okay. Well, that's not that high of a requirement, really. It's just have a bachelor's degree in a very generic field. And then, of course, your resume is going to make you stand out from the crowd, make them actually call you back. Let's see. Must be able to lift and support 51 pounds of weight in handling patients, medical equipment, and supplies. Required to walk, sit, stand, lifting, stooping, bending, reaching, pushing, pulling, as all the basic physical things almost every job requires, and highlights a great list of things that some people can't do. They might be able to do every other thing on the list, but you know, bending maybe doesn't work for people. And so there is, I imagine, a very large number of people who either work these jobs and say they can do a thing and then they really can't, or there are people who are not getting jobs when they really could do the job otherwise. They just can't bend over. And it's not like if you can't bend over, you're then automatically qualified for unemployment or disability or anything like that. No, you're just screwed and have to try and find another job. Speaking of being screwed, they probably should fire the person who doesn't know how to double space lines without adding an extra bullet point on the essential functions. I'm being too critical there, but that is not good word processing. But yeah, overall that job listing's not demanding too much. There is some things certainly to consider there, as far as, do you want to work in a hospital where you're likely to get sick more often and be exposed to more germs? Do you want to work with kids who are constantly sick and unhappy, just so you can kind of work with video games when you're not even going to be the one playing the video games? Yeah, you definitely should think about some of that. Do you want to work for a hospital that's likely going to be underpaying you and overworking you, while also overcharging patients, which you probably won't see much of that paycheck coming to you? Well, technically you might be working for Child's Play Charity, so you might be getting underpaid and overworked for from a different angle. Anyways, last big news for today, then I think I'll take a bit of a break. The Sony Interactive Entertainment, we already talked about this, has appointed 2 new CEOs, and this guy, with this guy being the Platform Experience Group leader, and this guy leading the Studio Business Group. Which, what this effectively also says is that even if you are technically calling these 2 CEOs, Sony, the parent company, wants to be in charge more. They seemingly did not like the idea of Jim Ryan getting power over Sony exclusively, or getting credit for Sony exclusively, both of which kind of happened. Alright, I'm going to take a bit of a break. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm still trying to figure out a better way to integrate an intermission of some sort into my live streams, because the bathroom breaks are certainly just not going anywhere. Yeah, and frankly, just scheduling it, I think, makes a lot of sense. What also doesn't make any sense, though, is why in these past 2 streams has it taken me 2 hours to just talk about big news? Like, that seems like that's taking an extra hour, and I don't feel like we really have had that much extra big news happening. Am I just moving too slow? I mean, how could I ever get these streams down to an hour when I can't even get the first of like 3 sections down to an hour? Anyways, let's continue and go through all the new games on Steam. Let's see. Now, one of the things I noticed is that my automatic clips program seems to have glitched out in a way that ended up putting it into an infinite loop where it was trying the wrong information over and over and over again. And so that needs more work. Hopefully I've fixed it this time. Do I want to give this a chance? I'll be generous. The other thing, still haven't gone back and fixed the delay before startup, so I would want to work on that. Of course, I am in very much a weird position today where I'd much prefer to just spend the rest of the day making Fallout New Vegas footage than work on small improvements. Do I want to give this a chance? Nah. Yeah, in the last stream I talked about ambitions of making a new chart. I haven't put any thought into making a new chart. There is work there that would also have to be done. It's just always work. Here we have Braid Anniversary Edition, which I don't know if there's any new content around the Anniversary Edition. So you're being asked to pay $20 for a game that frankly should only be worth about $5. While it was praised by mainstream video game journalists very highly, it's not really that much of a game that your average gamer would really bother to play. This is interesting that it's this Thekla Incorporated developing and publishing it, instead of Jonathan Blow, which at the time Jonathan Blow was more upset with people streaming Braid, but then I did stream The Witness and it seemed like there was no problem there. So who knows? Like maybe he's cooled down on his rhetoric. I would have to kind of wonder if the original Braid, which I thought was on Steam, has been delisted now in favor of this. And that is a pattern we really cannot abide, is to let's just eliminate a game so we can relist it at a higher price. Says it's beautiful high-resolution graphic updates, new levels, hours of insightful commentary built into the game in a clever manner. So thoughtful effort. Okay. So it does feel like this is a different experience. So then I would argue, if that's the case, there should be some DLC here for free for owners of the Anniversary Edition that is just the original Braid. Or there should be a bundle for the Anniversary Edition and the original edition for the same price. I definitely am going to have to do some research to see if the original Braid... Well, you know what? I can do it on my phone, can't I? I will just take a moment to search on Steam on my phone if you can buy the original Braid. Let's see, Steam. Load up. Type in Braid. ID. Yes, it very much seems to me like the original version of Braid has just been delisted. The only thing that's coming up now is the soundtrack. Yep. I was able through the soundtrack to link back to the original listing of Braid, and it says notice Braid is no longer on the Steam store. And the developer of that Braid and publisher of that Braid is called Number None. So it's a completely different company, although who knows, it may all just be Jonathan Blow in the background. So yeah, for historical preservation reasons, taking things down should not really be allowed by Steam. But Steam never really promised that they would be interested in helping you historically preserve things. Steam still is DLC or DRM, not DLC. Although there's plenty of that on Steam. So at any point Steam could go out of business. It's highly unlikely, and you would lose access to all your Steam games, and then everybody would just go pirate all their games. But at any smaller point, your account could get banned or games can be removed. I don't think we've actually seen an instance so far where a game was removed from the library of people who have already bought the game. There probably has been something that was just blatantly copyright infringing that has been removed, but I'd say that's about it. There's not been any reporting on anything like that I recall. And we're still seeing a lot of garbage games. I cannot abide 3 different art styles in any game. This might be something. Give that a chance too. Yeah. Seems like the anniversary edition is it. There were 3 pieces of news that I missed because I was testing my macro like a stream or 2 ago. I don't think those pieces of news are relevant enough for me to try and find them and go back to them though. So yeah, not big things. Let's see, copy bar, the story of Sisyphus. This looks like a Goat Simulator clone, but that might mean it's decent enough. We're seeing several visual novels I can make YouTube shorts on. One of the problems here is I still don't see a split. Like, which that's like, if I was going to be incredibly picky about what I was going to make a YouTube short on, down to the point where I was making only 30 YouTube shorts every time I streamed, which would be about where I'd want to target. I just don't know how I could get it down to 30 without curating and just applying massive amounts of personal opinion and leaving a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. Inherently, that's what every single other person does. Most people don't even want to talk about new games, but even the people that do want to talk about new games are leaving the vast majority, 99.999% of all games on the cutting room floor, even though there's enough there to at least slightly justify showing people. I don't know if I have a good feel of what showing people even means though. Inherently, I do recognize that if you were just getting all of my YouTube shorts shoved in your face in your notification feeds, you might very likely, the majority of people would not enjoy that, depending on how many other YouTube shorts they're watching. That would just be overwhelming and too much and annoying. But there is somebody out there. There's a right audience for each of the YouTube shorts, I think. And I think there probably is somebody who really does enjoy the YouTube shorts. Like, there's gotta be at least one other person out there like me who would like to know about basically every new game, even if it is just for a brief minute look, which I'm not sure I'm even spending a minute looking at a lot of these games. And there is a level of curation here. I'm not just putting out everything. There is, I guess, a question if I could automate making YouTube shorts and scheduling them for every single game. Would that work better? Probably not. Inherently, I'm limited to 100 uploads a day, and I'm limited to some number of should I give this a chance? Yeah. These look like these might be old games that actually do have some kind of following. There's a whole series of them. This is an old DOS game, I imagine. So we got a bunch of old games all being dumped out at the same time. I wish there was a way to make the YouTube shorts more interesting and a longer video experience that people would sit through and get me more watch time. Inherently, I need more watch time, and inherently, I'm not finding a way to increase watch time too much. A lot of these are already on the follow list. Follow list is still broken, although I do have a slight thought. Nope, I actually don't have any thought why the follow list is broken. I do have a slight thought why the Gamatsu articles are not working. In that when I click a new tab and open a new page, how does a game like this get allowed? This highlights how there's just nobody looking at all at the games that are getting listed on Steam Direct. There's just no way. Although, wait a minute. Like, they're being silly about this. There is, perhaps with the Steam Deck, an argument around getting something like this. Yeah. No, I still think Steam should not allow something like this. If Steam was trying to give you a way on the Steam Deck to just turn the screen off, the way to do that would be the power button. Yeah. You wouldn't have a free to play game here. Apparently supports Steam achievements. Yeah. This is just garbage. I almost thought there might be a justification there. But no. That's not the way to do it. Blacking out the screen, blanking the screen is something that the Steam Deck, I think, mostly already does. If anything, in gaming mode on the Steam Deck, I don't think they have a screensaver. So if you wanted to launch a screensaver, that would be more difficult. And here we have a game that very obviously should be in the adult section from one thumbnail alone, and yet it is being hidden. It's being put in the main listing. The funny thing here is it doesn't look like a doesn't really feel like it's a terrible game, but it definitely feels like it is trying to sell on sex and lewdness a little bit more. Full nudity in specific outfits and abuse of legal drugs. This is good enough quality to put on the fault list just for my own personal information. But yeah, I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it. And that brought me through all the games that came out on Steam since Monday fairly quickly, which I'm hoping we didn't miss anything. I don't think we really did. But yeah, the follow list cleanup still not working. Let's look at SteamDB and see what our 24-hour peaks are as far as recent games. Well, not recent games, as far as overall games. Stardew Valley high up in the 8th spot. Fallout 4 in the 11th spot again. Be Rising in the 13th spot. Yep. Hades 2 in the 24th spot, which, it being early access, is going to split its player base. Hades 1 in the 39th spot, which probably not too much else to mention. I definitely picked the wrong side. If I was just trying to appeal to the largest number of people, playing Fallout New Vegas, which is in, I believe, the 60th or 70th spot here, was way worse a decision than playing Fallout 4. And once again, my chart seems not to be getting the right information because none of these spots seem to be squeezing. All this information seems to be from 5.8. So either I changed something on the chart or I'm not collecting enough information. So my chart's broken. I knew the second I was going to touch it, there was a chance I was going to break it. So we can't really derive anything from a trend, but I imagine the trend line still is just carving downward. See, there's a PUBG Classic event being promoted, and Animal Well making it to the top there. That's pretty big, I'm sure. The Endless Replayability Fest still going on. Police Stories. It's not the game I thought of. I'm thinking of a different game. Elephant Collection. Yeah, there's still just a question about whether a spring event is happening. Steam Deck now back to their default advertisement. I thought maybe the Hades being playable on Steam Deck would have been their default advertisement for a little bit longer. Although it definitely makes a lot more sense to just sell the Steam Deck generically based on all games, not on just one game. And then we go here. Braid is trending. Homeworld 3 is trending, but nothing really big. Steam Deck still top. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut being a top selling, Hades 2 being a top seller. Let's check out Ghost of Tsushima. And as far as Steam is concerned, popular upcoming. Doesn't mean much of anything. So yeah, I'm still just waiting to see. Is Diablo 4 way down here as far as updates go? Still waiting to see if a spring sale is going to happen, or if it's just going to be a summer sale, or if neither happens even is a possibility. Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut is coming out in just a few days, and remember, this requires a PlayStation Network account for the PlayStation overlay and the online multiplayer, but maybe not for just playing the game. I really have dropped the ball in trying to play any kind of more Japanese samurai type games. That one, they haven't made a lot of them, and two, there's just a I've just not gotten around to playing any of them once they started making ones that were actually good. Alright, So let's see if we can do the headlines today and be done a little bit quicker. Watch the Assassin's Creed Shadow reveal trailer here. This is at videogameschronicle.com. The Rockstar co-founder Dan Houser's new studio is making an open-world action-adventure game. HBO has released the first official Last of Us Season 2 images. Tango says the physical version of Hi-Fi Rush is still coming, and a final patch is releasing today. The UK government says there's no legal requirement for games to remain playable. Saints Row Reboot was likely the lowest selling in the franchise history. The Mortal Kombat 2 movie has been given a 2025 release date. WWE 2K24 ECW update adds barbed wire baseball bat and more hidden weapons. Super Mario Land, Alleyway, and Baseball have been added to Nintendo Switch Online. Yoko Taro's new game might be near, it might not be near. PlayStation 5s have shipped almost 5 times more than Xbox Series X and S's in Q1, according to a research firm's estimates. Diablo 4 Season 4 Loot Reborn is now live. Dread by Daylight Roguelite gets a surprise release and 2 million copies are free. Dungeons & Dragons and Castlevania chapters also announced for Dead by Daylight. So how do we get to the roguelite game? What the Fog is the name if you sign in and create a behavior account. But you then wouldn't get a Steam copy, I guess, is that. So this game, What the Fog, looks nothing like Dead by Daylight, in my opinion. It's just not anywhere close to the same art style. Little chibi CGI characters. Or low polygon characters, I'm not sure how you even... No, not low polygon characters, it would be chibi polygonal characters. Anyways, moving on. Supergiant shares plans for its first Hades 2 patch. I guess check that out at videogameschronicle.com if you're interested. Madden NFL 25 will be revealed this week ahead of the August release, it's been claimed. Square Enix's share prices dropped nearly 16% following underwhelming financial results. Xbox is adding the ability to pre-download updates. Thought that probably would have existed already. Certainly makes a lot of sense that that would happen. Yep. The Lego Zelda Great Deku Tray will be released in September for £300, it's been claimed. £300 is about what they charge for Zelda, for Lego sets. The question, though, is what does the set actually look like? Set will come in 2,500 pieces, and it's claimed it will be released September 1st and cost £300, roughly $300 US. Set will feature 2 different designs from Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild. So is one side the tree from one perspective and one side the tree from another perspective? Why would you even bother to do that? I would half expect it to be a tree face on one side and a playset on the back side, with several different layers in which you could play with a Zelda minifig. If it was full tree all the way around, that's going to be a lot of extra pieces for not much reward, and you would expect it to then split and open up at that point. Lego already has a treehouse set that's pretty nice and already very big, but some of these sets, when they are custom in particular, do get crazy in size and crazy in cost. I wouldn't be surprised if the piece count is misleading and it is actually physically a fairly small set with just a lot of small minifig or 1x1 pieces. Anyways, guess we'll talk about this more when photos get announced. 2 Joy-Con drift lawsuits have been dismissed after 5 years. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI, and Foam Stars all sold less than expected, according to the Square Enix president. PS5 hits 59 million units, hardware units shipped, as Helldivers 2 also breaks the PlayStation's launch sales record. The live service game itself sold 12 million copies in 12 weeks. Sony has named 2 PlayStation CEOs to replace Jim Ryan. Marvel Rivals team has apologized for seeking to restrict negative coverage. Assassin's Creed Shadows release date and DLC details have seemingly leaked. Square Enix confirms US-Europe layoffs as part of its restructuring. Take note here that they are focusing on saying we're going to lay off as many non-Japanese people first before we decide to actually lay off anybody or even try to lay off the unionized Japanese workers. I'm pretty sure they're unionized. So far, what Square Enix is doing is really not that different from what they've done in the past. Like, at some points, they'll have to do something different if they expect actual different outcomes. Fallout 4 adds a new graphics and performance options on the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. It's worth pointing out that DF Retro looked at these new options and said that even with these new options, which improve a few things, they are still not as good as the highest settings on PC, which I don't know if that's a fair comparison or not. Assassin's Creed Codename Red gets its official title and reveal trailer is coming this week. It's Assassin's Creed Shadows now. Red Dead Redemption could be finally coming to PC, a datamine suggests. These are fairly old news articles. And we didn't get any follow-up on this, whether that's going to actually happen or not. The Rogue Prince of Persia receives a new release date. Warner Bros. Has U-turned on the decision to delist indie games published by Adult Swim. A new Doom game could be revealed at the Xbox Showcase in June. New Multiverses trailer shows the Joker in action, suggests that the Powerpuff Girls are coming. Shin Megami Tensei 5 is being delisted from the Switch eShop. And unofficial PC ports of Nintendo 64 games could be about to get a lot easier. Yep, this by far is the most exciting news for nostalgic gamers in a very long time, and probably the biggest news for this week. The only hope is that nothing goes wrong and we will, within a matter of months, be able to recompile every single Nintendo 64 ROM that exists. Although they also are exclusively focusing in on the US ROMs, so it needs probably some tweaks if you wanted to play the Japanese ROMs or the European ROMs or any other country's ROMs. I don't know how many other country ROMs would exist besides the US and the Japanese. Maybe there are European ROMs of some Nintendo 64 games, but considering the era that Nintendo 64 was out, then there wouldn't be like Chinese versions or South American versions. Like, there isn't likely to be any kind of ROMs around on versions like that, or versions like that that existed in the first place. Square Enix confirms it's canceled games which don't fit its new development strategy. Now, it's kind of funny that they're calling it a new development strategy, but their first actions are still to lay off people, as in the same way everybody else is laying off people. Square Enix will make AAA games multi-platform as part of its aggressive new business plan. Inherently, Sony announcing a new CEO that a couple days after Square Enix makes this announcement feels connected. Feels like it could be connected. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Fans revolt after EA nerfs the EA FC rewards that were too good. Sony reportedly has formed a studio with former Deviation Games developers. A Fallout 4 patch featuring new graphics options is coming next week. I think that patch has already come out. And CM Punk has returned to a WWE game for the first time in a decade. CM Punk left the WWE in 2014. Bungie's Marathon trilogy is coming to Steam, with the first game being free. So check that out. A new Zelda Tears of the Kingdom merchandise has been announced, including official soundtracks. And Fallout 4 was April's best-selling game in the UK. And those articles went back so far that time that I don't think any of the articles I thought we may have missed out have been missed out now. I wish I knew better why my macros sometimes lose their position and just go back even further than they should. They've been programmed, I guess, well enough to do that instead of shortchanging us on news. But I would like it just to work better and know which links we've already talked about and not have me repeat the same thing in between a couple of different episodes. Not that repeating's a big deal. If anything, it's probably helpful. If you compare it to like a 24-hour news station, like those stations repeat the same news multiple times every couple hours. Anyways, let's go through the Gematsu headlines now. PlayStation Plus game catalog and classic catalog lineup for May 2024 has been announced. Red Dead Redemption 2, Deceive Inc., Crime City, Rock-A City, Crime Boss, Rock-A City, and more. Wayfinder is going to continue as a paid co-op title, relaunching in early access on June 11th for PC. PS5 version to follow this summer, PS4 version to be discontinued. Xbox Series version coming this fall. Seems like a lot of different things happening there. You can see right now that Wayfinder is reviewed very negatively. It is in early access right now, and it seems like they very much are trying to get a second bite at the apple. And I don't think I can really abide any of that, so I'm going to take it off the fall list. If it makes it back to the fall list, then so be it. Now, the reason why I don't think my macro is working, where it's supposed to look for a link with the name Steam on it and always open tabs around that, but I don't think that's working because I don't think I ever actually shift over focus to these tabs. I'm just opening them from a different web page, and so you couldn't, if you're not shifting focus, then obviously you're not going to see a link that says Steam. On the other aspect, the way and where the tabs open might be a consideration. So I need to get the first part working so it actually opens the tabs to even find out if the tabs are opening in the right place or the wrong place. Because ideally, I would talk about a headline here, then I would click the middle mouse button to close this page, and then the exact next page that would open up in its place would be the Steam page for that game. That's what we're going for, trying to optimize this experience as much as possible so I have shorter streams theoretically. Moving on. Ino Tria, the last song, has been delayed to September 19th. It has restored an Xbox Series version. A PS5 and PC demo launches May 22nd. This looks somewhat interesting in its images. Apparently some kind of Souls-like. It's already on my fault list now, so I don't think I'm going to make a new short around it. F1 Manager 2024 launches July 23. Do I really need to put that on the fall list? Probably not, but I'll do it anyways. Sword of the Necromancer Resurrection launches in the late summer. This is a Sword of the Necromancer 3D remake. Which people seem very hyped around the idea of making a 3D remake. Not sure, looking at the graphics, whether I'd really be that excited. Yosuke Saito is working on a new project with Yoko Taro and Keiichi Okabe. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1849. I saw, I think, Game Grumps playing this game, and from the screenshot it looks like it's a fun game, but actually seeing the gameplay footage for even a minute made me very uninterested in this Endless Oceans Luminous. It's a Switch game exclusively, it seems, getting 32 out of 40, where Read Only Memories Neurodiver is even lower at 30 out of 40, and Top Spin 2K25 is 32 out of 40. So nothing knocking my socks off on the Famitsu review scores for today. I question whether wearing a diving suit with so many different patterns and variants on it is a wise thing to do. Wouldn't you convince fish that maybe you're fish, or convince sharks that you're fish and have things bite you? And if you needed camouflage under the ocean, that'd be one thing, but I don't think that would work either. Umbra Claw Cast Showcase trailer is available on Gematsu. Beyblade X Zone has been announced for the Switch and PC. No link to Steam. Game Boy Nintendo Switch Online adds Alleyway Baseball and Super Mario Land. One-shot developer Future Cat Games announces Margin of the Strange for PC, a gardening-themed mystery exploration game. I don't understand these visuals at all. This feels like this is a little kid's head and upper body sitting on the body of another person. I don't think that's what it is. I think there's some kind of long neck scarf going on here with a fluffy scarf, and this person has antennae and maybe wings, so maybe it's supposed to be an insect creature of some sort. This looks like this is an insect creature of some sort too. Yeah, this makes more sense now that I see it from this perspective as to what I'm looking at. Yeah, this looks like a very weird game that may have gardening added to it superfluously, unnecessarily. I'll have to wait and see more about it before I can feel like I'm going to be hyped about it or not. Dread Out Remastered Collection has been announced for the PS5 and Switch. Dead by Daylight, Dungeons & Dragons, and Castlevania chapters have been announced. The casting of Frank Stone gameplay trailer and screenshots are available on Gematsu. This is another Dead by Daylight spin-off game, which at least seems like it is in the same visual style. Is it a single player game? Even at that would be weird to play something that's a spin-off of a multiplayer game. That wouldn't be a terrible way to help maintain and create single player horror games, is to recognize that they need to be spin-off and secondary to multiplayer games, which could help maintain a universe and maintain enthusiasm. This is totally a single player experience. That's a interesting thought, certainly. Project T, Dead by Daylight P versus player versus event action shooter by Midwinter Entertainment launches an insider program. So, yet another Dead by Daylight spin-off game. Players versus events instead of players versus players. Needy Streamer Overload Switch Physical Edition has been announced for North America. I don't think this game is as well received as they had hoped, according to I think the Famitsu reviews of last week. A Dead by Daylight co-op roguelike spin-off called What the Fog is now available for PC. Yeah. This one really doesn't look like Dead by Daylight at all. Seems like people are receiving it well, however. Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip launches May 30th. It's a PC Steam game, I guess. Turn-based RPG Alzara Radiant Echoes has been announced for consoles and PC. It is a tribute to JRPG classics, which that's interesting when you look at 3D CGI graphics in the trailer. What you have to really ask yourself is what was good and what do people still appreciate about classic JRPGs, and I would say what people appreciate is that there was interesting fantasy stories being told with interesting characters. I don't think people are particularly interested in super long grindy RPG elements, turn-based elements, 2D graphics, RPG Maker visuals. Even looking at this trailer here, though, I question whether this couldn't get very slow and grindy. It's really just going to come down to how many different times do you fight people, fight random enemies. This game definitely feels like it has some newer twists on top of modern graphics. They're much more reasonable. I don't know how you can even really describe it as a tribute to classic JRPGs when you really should just call it a modern JRPG. The characters here, more of a dark-skinned lady protagonist, is different from what you would have gotten in traditional JRPGs, where you would have had more of a traditional fantasy knight character. Even this guy is dressed a little too fancy for a traditional JRPG. And here you have a second female companion character, dark-skinned. That's definitely not something you would have seen in a traditional JRPG. None of these characters really scream that they're Japanese, and most traditional Japanese games would have expected the characters to seem like they were Japanese to begin with. Speaking of the shifts in JRPGs, apparently there's been some slight player backlash from fans of the original Atelier series, in that more modern Atelier games are being a little bit more willing to be lewd with their characters. Atelier Rydo in particular introduced a very well received female figure and female protagonist whose figure was well received also, and they have doubled down on that perhaps further than most expected, in that they've released a action figure that you can put on the shelves of her being half dressed, so you can see her in her underwear. So that's pretty extreme for what the Atelier series had been up until that point. It is, of course, just a side piece of collectibles memorabilia and not in any way really affecting the games. But I imagine to some of the fans of the original Atelier series, this would be the equivalent of having like Princess Peach be released as a model in her underwear. That there would be some weird responses to that, or like confused responses to that, because it's just not what you really would expect, and it comes off as slightly inappropriate. But I figured it's worth mentioning, and in that case, at least that is fans of the old way of Atelier games coming out and expressing their actual opinions, and not just it turning into a hate mob or a campaign from some Kotaku journalist who never cared about the Atelier series in the first place. But yeah, real fans expressing their opinions is something to be praised, even if the fans themselves don't agree. Moving on, Xbox Game Pass adds Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, Immortals of Avium, and Lords of the Fallen, and more in late May. A former XCOM and The Sims developer establishes a Midsummer Studios to develop next-gen life simulation games. While I am currently playing Fallout New Vegas, I definitely don't have any desire to play anything that's a life simulation game, because I don't want games with super complex simulation happening in the first place. I definitely don't want games that are simulating boring regular real life. It is worth mentioning, another story I saw on Reddit is that someone had a Sims account and they had bought the Sims, and apparently they had put a topless mod into the Sims, so that they on their personal account could see the Sims characters topless, which really wouldn't show you much from the angle you usually are looking. And apparently EA has added a morals clause effectively into their account rules and banned their account, which is massively dangerous to do, considering how some of the people who have bought Sims could have spent thousands of dollars on DLC. But even if that wasn't the case, you still bought the game. You should be allowed to do whatever you want in a single player game that's not going to affect anyone else. It is a 180 degree turn from what Sims 1 and 2 were, where back in the day it was very common to have like nude mods in the Sims if you wanted them, and there was nothing EA could have done about it because you weren't connected to an internet and they couldn't have checked to see if you had the mod. This would be the equivalent of, say, Skyrim not allowing adult mods based on some morals clause or some appearance of EA pretending like they have any morals at all. But yeah, so be warned out there, don't install any mods, I imagine, to Sims 4 or anything else that's connecting to the internet and checking, which is pretty much all modern games. And generally the recommendation, I think, is don't play Sims 4. Sims has definitely been at the forefront of pushing several SJW ways of thinking and movements, and you really have to question, has it actually accomplished anything for their goals? And I would say it hasn't. It's probably 100% just irritated people. Video games are just not a good forum to push new ideas, frankly, and get people's attention. People who come to play video games just want to have fun and be entertained. They don't want to be spoken down to or educated about anything. Anyways, moving on. Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus for Switch has been delayed to July 25th in the West. This must have been a game that was announced quite a while ago because I don't recognize it. Kamiboko Mythology of the Cube launches August 29th in Japan. And here you have a traditional JRPG game that, I mean, or what you call a modern JRPG game that looks very similar to the previous JRPG game we looked at. So I don't know why you could describe one and not the other as a homage to traditional JRPGs. Almost every modern JRPG is going to be an homage to traditional ones. And what do you even mean? Where's the line that makes old JRPGs traditional? 2D graphics might be the line. In this case, you can see a lot of characters' faces that feel like they could more easily be described as Japanese characters, or at the very least Japanese characters, and Japanese players could see that these characters might be Japanese, and you can see the outfits are more fantasy based and more traditionally medieval fantasy armor. Helldivers 2 sales have topped 12 million. PS5 shipments have topped 59.3 million. Monster Hunter series sales have topped 100 million. Monster Hunter Rise itself has topped 15 million. I guess the Monster Hunter series might be an example of a game that is somewhat like an RPG but has gone in its own direction. Samurai Warriors 4 DX is now available for PC worldwide. Sony Interactive Entertainment appoints new CEO Hideki Nishino and Herman Holst. Beat-em-up action-adventure game Big Helmet Heroes has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. And then that's going to bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, and then we'll be done for today. IO Interactive hires the CTO to steer technical ops and engine development, which I guess means that they are looking to make their own engine, or at least their own variant of Unity. Devolver Digital's marketing advice: let people play. I guess that's decent advice. Devolver Digital, very weird company at this point, and I would say hasn't really done the greatest of jobs of consistently promoting games. Like, you look at actual games they should be promoting, and yeah, I'm having a hard time remembering the names of a lot of these games, and a lot of these I can't place at all as far as which games these are from. Sega blames falling profits on challenging conditions in Europe. Marvel's Midnight Suns director worries the card-based combat kept players away. Stellaris' new AI characters are powered by AI voices. What does that mean? Paradox says human actors are receiving royalties in exchange for lending their voices to voice generation tools. So they're trying to make it sound like a good thing that they're using AI. Which is probably not really the truth, because they probably paid small royalties to human voice actors for characters who probably deserved medium to large royalties. That would be my assumption as to what's going on. The Fleabag creator Phoebe Waller-Bridge is going to produce a Tomb Raider show at Amazon. I would assume this is her. I don't think she'll be playing Lara Croft, though. Yeah, I just question whether you can make a Tomb Raider TV series. Hooded Horse co-founder says publishers should ditch the horrible recoup clause to help developers. It's probably worth mentioning on that previous article too that almost certainly they could have cropped that image of the lady or gotten a professional headshot from her agent instead of taking a screenshot from the, I'm assume, Fleabag TV show where she's wearing more of a risque cleavage showing shirt. It's just not really professional. It's not something I think you would do or a game developer would have done if it was just a male celebrity actor. Yeah, they made a decision there, and even if they would have done that with a male presenting celebrity, it still would have been wrong. They should be picking better professional images of the characters, of the actors, or whoever they're talking about. Sony champions live service titles, claims PS5 hardware sales have peaked. That probably is true. But yeah, Sony saying that they are looking forward to more live service titles is probably not something gamers want to hear. Fireaxe's vet Jake Solomon unveils a new studio making a life sim game. Unity Creates boss Mark Whitten is resigning. Sony has appointed 2 PlayStation CEOs to replace Jim Ryan. Square Enix is going to lay off employees in America and European offices. Developer Double 11 has been taken off the Prison Architect series after 9 years. And then here's a story: how Cryptmaster turned a dictionary's worth of words into a fun dungeon crawler. Yeah. And that is it for the show. So, as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.